Chapter 2. The Flight of Icarus. The jet waited on a private apron at Neo-San Francisco's upper-tier skyport, a matte white arrow with its nose pointed toward the deepening violet of the eastern sky. It looked small from the glassed-in conference suite where Marcus stood, hands braced on the rail, watching fuel drones dock and undock with insect precision. Below him, the city had become a constellation of light stitched together by the thin neon of drone lanes and the molten rivers of freeway traffic. Above, the first stars pushed through a thin veil of smog and stratospheric haze. The jet's fuselage carried no logos, only a faint, pearlescent sheen that made it vanish and reappear as it moved under the apron floods, like something half present in this world and half in another. He could pick out Elias even at this distance. The older man walked with a particular forward lean, as if pulled towards some point just beyond his visible horizon. Two synthbots flanked him, faceless white guardians in travel mode, their profiles softened and made anonymous by adaptive shelling. A third rolled a slim carbon case behind them. The case Marcus knew contained the mobile buffer for the soul drive. The drive itself sat now in a vacuum-insulated cradle inside the jet, but Elias had insisted on this additional redundancy. No single point of failure, he'd said. Not for this. Marcus's reflection stared back at him from the glass. High cheekbones, sharp jaw, dark hair ironed into a part that had become more habit than style. An identically dressed version of him paced behind, faint in reflection. The boardroom. Marcus? Helena Park's voice, dry as paper, floated across the room. The directors were assembling at the long glass-top table. A dozen of them, most present as hollow presences from across the world, each framed by a hovering nameplate and a wash of brand-consistent blue light. A few local diehards, gray-suited and grave, occupied actual chairs. The interplay of the physical and the projected made the room feel more crowded than it was, a council of phantoms judging one living man. Helena sat at the head in one of the real chairs. She wore a high-collared black dress with a vertical silver seam that bisected her torso like a narrowed zipper. Her hair was drawn back in a simple knot, emphasizing the fine architecture of her face. High, flat cheekbones, narrow mouth. Eyes that had learned to hide their calculations behind a faint, habitual squint. She had the kind of presence that made silence feel full. "We're ready," she said. "Whenever you are." Marcus glanced once more at the apron. One of the synth bots had paused at the bottom of the mobile stair, its head tilted back toward the glass tower as though it knew he was watching. For a second, irrationally, he wondered if it did. Their external optics had full spectrum resolution. Nothing stopped Elias from routing a feet up and waving, performing some last theatrical gesture. But Elias didn't look back. He moved slowly, each step a measured negotiation with pain and failing joints, until he reached the foot of the stair. The bots fell into position as he began his ascent. One step and another, each one an act of stubborn will. Marcus exhaled, forced his hands off the rail, and crossed back to the table. The glass acknowledged him with a subtle warmth where his fingertips brushed it. His profile icon pulsed once in the air and settled. Marcus Vane, interim CEO, acting. He tried not to read too much into the acting. "Let's keep this tight," he said, taking the seat opposite Helena. "The window's narrow. He wants final redundancy sign-off before they take off." "A generous concession," muttered one of the hollow directors, a London fund head with a perpetually damp expression. "Given that he's taking the only copy of our founder into the stratosphere." 3 copies, Marcus corrected automatically. Primary, mirror, air-gapped clone. All cryptographically locked. All returning to Synapse custody post-initiation. "It's not the number of copies I'm worried about," the man shot back. "It's the fact that our CEO will be—" "What, exactly?" "A ghost in a machine thousands of kilometers from the nearest regulator." The word ghost hung in the air. Helena lifted a hand, palm down, like smothering a flame. "We'll get to governance. For now, the agenda, status briefing on the Andes facility, upload risk modeling, contingency planning, and messaging." "Marcus?" The lights in the room dimmed fractionally, and the glass table bloomed with a topographic projection of the Andes. Jagged peaks in translucent white, valleys in shadowed blue. A pulsing golden dot marked their facility halfway up a near-vertical mountainside. Site ALTA-Q, Marcus said. Altitude 4,300 meters. Ambient temperature ranges -5 to -20 Celsius. Triple redundant geothermal and fusion microgrid. Hardened against everything short of a direct kinetic strike. A director with the severe haircut of an old-world politician leaned into his holofeed. We all read the brief, Marcus. Cut to the part where we lose the most valuable human brain on the planet if something goes wrong. And the drive, the Londoner added. And the PR, someone else murmured. Marcus layered in another model, the facility's internal schematic, its nested rings of security. Project Nirvana has passed every stress test we can design. The neural map is complete. The upload environment is isolated from the main Synapse cloud for the initial transfer. No live link until we have stable substrate residency. As for Elias's body, he let the word travel. The failure scenarios we're modeling there are mostly medical. Stroke, heart failure, complications at altitude. We have full med on site and an intervention team on the jet. But he insisted on live consciousness during upload. No cryo, no preemptive shutdown. That's non-negotiable. Helena steepled her fingers. Because? Because he believes the continuity of subjective experience is integral to the validity of the result, said another voice. Elias, from the end of the table. His image shimmered into being in an empty chair, half size at first, then upscaling to human proportions. The hollow rig in the skyport's VIP lounge had finally synced. He appeared in profile, gaze angled toward a window none of them could see. Gaunt face lit by whatever light spilled across the tarmac outside. A second later, he turned directly toward them. Apologies for the delay, he said. They misplaced my tea. His voice was thinner than it used to be. Illness had sanded some of the resonance out of it, but the cadence was the same. Precise, faintly amused, like someone dissecting his own punchline. The continuity of conscious experience, he repeated, picking up Marcus's thread. If I'm anesthetized or clinically dead before the upload, then the entity that wakes on the other side is a copy, not a continuation. Philosophically uninteresting. Medically acceptable, perhaps, but I'm not doing this to survive my own corpse. I'm doing it to prevent the corpse from ever being more than an old shell. Elias, Helena said, we appreciate you making time. We won't keep you long. The board has questions. The board always has questions, he said lightly. It's their job. Ask. The Londoner wasted no time. Is it really necessary that you go yourself, physically, to this mountain bunker? Couldn't we replicate the environment closer to home? Or beam the map? No, Elias said. Silence held for a moment. He let it sit, then added, I chose that location for thermal stability, low electromagnetic noise, and political altitude. The fewer eyes between me and the quantum cores, the better. As for beaming the map, I will not have my mind pass through half-secure relays like a grocery list. The soul drive travels with me, in my hand, to the machine that will house it. Anything else is laziness masquerading as trust. Safety protocols aren't laziness, Helena said. We're concerned primarily with continuity of leadership. If something happens to me, Elias interrupted, Marcus will continue as acting CEO. You'll convene an emergency search committee. Synapse will wobble, then find a new axis. You'll build a narrative of tragic loss and resilient innovation, and the stock will recover. He spoke not as conjecture, but as someone describing a product pipeline. Elias, Helena said again, more tightly, this isn't about the stock. Of course it is, he said. And about the other thing no one in this room wants to say out loud. The cult of Elias. The idea that I am indispensable to the mythology of Synapse, that without my black turtlenecks and architectural metaphors, no one will believe the future is safe in your hands. He smiled, thin and brief. That mythology has been useful. It let us pull the world forward faster than regulators, competitors, and common sense wanted. But it's also a shackle. As long as I'm meat, I'm mortal. As long as I'm mortal, your timelines are constrained by my biology. I am giving us continuity beyond that. This flight, he gestured faintly, presumably toward the waiting jet, is the riskiest step. After that, assuming we succeed, you will have a version of me that does not get pneumonia or panic attacks or existential dread at 3 in the morning. Several faces around the table flickered with faint amusement at that. Elias, Marcus said, leaning forward, you're giving us continuity, yes, but we're giving the world something unprecedented. Our founder not only lives on, but becomes the first embodied synthetic mind on the market. That level of concentration, leadership, product, PR, in one substrate is terrifying, Elias suggested. Risky, Marcus said, like all worthwhile things. Helena cut in before Marcus could respond. Let's focus on governance. Post-upload, what mechanisms ensure that your new instantiation remains accountable to this board? Elias's gaze shifted to her. The same mechanisms, he said. Charters, voting structures, fiduciary duty. You'll have something to vote on, something to constrain. I'm not uploading into a rogue military drone or a basement server run by anarchists. I'm uploading into Synapse's most secure, regulated, audited environment. I've spent 30 years building this cage. I trust it. And yet, Helena said calmly, cages have doors, which you control, Elias replied. Marcus watched the exchange with an odd, doubled awareness. One part of him measured the impact of each phrase, mentally scanning the board members' micro-reactions, modeling vote probabilities and conflict surfaces. The other part replayed a memory from an hour earlier in the penthouse, when Elias had held out the sole drive like an apple. It had been heavier than it looked, a matte black rectangle no larger than a man's palm, its edges beveled, its surface broken only by a single recessed port and a small circle of frosted glass. The Thorne sigil, a simple vertical line crossing a horizontal one, was etched so subtly into the material that it was only visible when the light hit it exactly. This is me, Elias had said. Marcus had taken it reflexively, then felt his fingers tense when the weight registered. Not because of grams, but because of what it represented. Millions of hours of neural recording, pattern mapping, memory embedding. Elias's childhood in a Palo Alto bungalow, his first prototype AR rig in a dorm room lit by CRT glow. The boardrooms, the stage spotlights, the love affairs, the betrayals. The first time he had coughed blood and realized his hardware wanted to retire while his software did not. Don't drop it, Elias had joked. The warranty's terrible. Now that same drive hummed in a cradle inside the jet. Marcus's knuckles remembered the density of it. Risk aside, said another director, a Singaporean sovereign fund manager, whose avatar always appeared slightly sharper than everyone else's. Like higher pixel density made him more real. There is the question of communications. While you are in transit, we have a 9-hour window during which Synapse will not have an active media-facing CEO. In the event of an incident, we'll need... I've recorded a statement, Elias said. Several, actually, for different eventualities. Marcus has them. If the jet explodes on ascent, you run statement 1. If I die on the table, you run statement 2. If I vanish into a pocket dimension due to unforeseen quantum shenanigans, improvise based on the tone of statement 3. Someone actually laughed at that, a brief, brittle sound. This isn't a joke, Helena said. Of course it isn't, Elias said. That's why I'm leaving you the script, and why Marcus will stay in Neo San Francisco. Optics matter. If we both vanish into the sky, people will start making Roswell jokes and conspiracy hollows. One of us needs to be on the ground, performing steadiness. Helena's eyes slid to Marcus. He's ready, Elias added, unprompted. You've been treating him like my handler for years. He's more shark than shepherd, which is exactly what Synapse will need when I come back as something the world doesn't have language for yet. Shark, Marcus thought, with a half-bitter, half-pleased curl of his mouth. Elias always did love his little animal analogies. Wolves, swans, sharks. Humans reduced to single-trait totems that he could arrange around his mental board. You're very sure you're coming back, Helena said. I've bet my body on it, Elias replied. That's more than any of you are putting on the table today. He checked something off screen. An AR overlay, probably. They're calling me, he said. Final security, final indignities. I need to be physically present to be treated like cargo. Helena, the board will record a formal consent resolution, yes? It's already in queue, she said, pending this briefing. Then let's make it quick, Elias said. I'd rather spend my last minutes as a carbon-based CEO looking at mountains than arguing about devil's advocates. Helena's eyes tightened by a millimeter, but she inclined her head. Questions? They peppered him for another 10 minutes. About electromagnetic storms, he cited shielding metrics. About quantum coherence, he waved at a parade of in-house physicists whose signatures lined the risk models. About legal liability for a post-biological CEO, he pointed to the carefully crafted language in his updated contract. Elias Thorne, in any substrate, remained an employee and officer of Synapse, bound by the same duties and protections. Helena pressed once more on succession planning. Elias deflected with a joke about their fetish for worst-case scenarios. Marcus watched the clock inexorably march toward the takeoff slot. At the end, Helena's image straightened. All right, she said. If there are no further questions— There is one, Marcus said. He hadn't planned to speak. Not here. Not like this. But pressure had been building in his chest since the moment Elias's image appeared. Every risk model, every scenario tree, every Monte Carlo simulation they had rung through their servers over the last year told him the same thing. This flight was a narrow bridge over a very long drop. The expected value on the other side was astronomical. The tail risk, if everything failed, was a crater that would swallow not only Synapse's valuation, but his life's work. He'd never been risk-averse. You didn't turn a visionary's workshop into a global empire by playing safe. But the older he got, the more he respected tail risks, outliers, unmodeled terrain. Ask, Elias said. Marcus met his gaze. The hollow capture made Elias's eyes appear flatter than in person, but the intelligence behind them was the same. A fine, bright line focused like a laser. What happens, Marcus said slowly, if you change your mind? The board shifted. Helena frowned faintly. Marcus. No, he said. We've discussed the technicals, the legalities, but not this. You've been increasingly detached, Elias, philosophical. We're about to put you through an experience no human being has ever had. What if halfway up that mountain or halfway through that upload, you decide you don't want to come back? That Elias Thorne, as the world knows him, ends tonight. And what wakes there is something else. Something that doesn't care about earnings calls or product roadmaps or the board of Synapse Technologies. That's already true, Elias said softly. It took Marcus a second to realize he'd answered the question. I stopped caring about earnings calls 5 years ago, Elias continued. You know that. You've watched me dial out of the numbers so I could spend my remaining organic hours on problems that will actually matter in 50 years, not 5 quarters. The difference is that what waits for me at Alt-Q will have the capacity to care about both, or neither, or something else entirely. You're not really afraid I'll change my mind, Marcus. You're afraid you won't be able to predict it when I do. Marcus's throat felt suddenly dry. And you're not wrong, Elias went on. I will change. Profoundly. That is the point. You can't ask your species to evolve and then promise them it won't hurt, or that nothing essential will be altered. That's not evolution, that's a UX patch. He smiled, a twist of bone and light. But I can promise you this, he said. Whatever I become will not be less than what I am now, and it will remember that you hauled this creaking carcass up from a garage into orbit. If you're worried about being left behind, don't be. I fully intend to drag you with me, kicking and screaming. Helena looked between the two men. The resolution, she said, bringing them back to procedural ground. All in favor of authorizing Elias Thorne to proceed with substrate migration at Facility Alt-Q under the protocols outlined in Annexes A through Q? Around the table, hands went up in various formats. Physical, hollow-ghosted, stylized virtual glyphs. No one voted against. A few abstained for the record, covering their reputational backs in case history turned this meeting into a tribunal. The resolution passed. Good luck, Elias, Helena said. On behalf of the board and shareholders of Synapse Technologies, Don't start eulogizing me yet, Elias cut in. I'm not dead. I'm upgrading. The hollow feed flickered as he rose. Marcus, he said, walk with me. The conference room dissolved, hollows popping, chairs scraping, voices bleeding into other calls. Helena lifted her wrist, already triaging the next wave of regulator queries. Directors blinked out one by one like extinguished candles. Marcus's view shifted as he accepted Elias's private feed. He saw from Elias's eyes the VIP lounge, a minimalist space of pale wood and matte black surfaces, tastefully anonymous. Glass stretched ceiling to floor, framing the darkening apron and the waiting jet beyond. Security personnel in Synapse gray stood at discrete intervals. A flight attendant in a neutral-tone jumpsuit checked something on a tablet, then glanced up as Elias approached. Marcus turned from the empty boardroom and walked to the window, syncing his own AR to Elias's broadcast. For a moment, his perspective and Elias's overlaid perfectly. Two men staring out at the same plane, one from the tower, one from the lounge. "You staged that question," Elias said quietly, as if they were already alone. "I didn't," Marcus replied, equally low. "It staged itself." "Don't bullshit me," Elias said. "You've never asked a question in public that you didn't already know the answer you wanted to hear." Marcus let the comment slide. "We should make this last transmission count. In 9 hours, whatever we say to each other will be archival." "Every conversation is archival," Elias said. "We've just gotten better at indexing them." He moved closer to the glass. On Marcus's overlay, diagnostic tags bloomed around the jet. Fuel levels, structural integrity readings, wind vectors. The plane was a node in the Synapse ecosystem like any other, over-instrumented and over-observed. "You remember the first time we flew together?" Elias asked. "Tokyo," Marcus said immediately. "You spilled green tea on a 30 million credit projection rig and called it an unanticipated liquid cooling test." "Zurich, actually," Elias corrected. "But I appreciate you filing our shared memories under avoidable disasters." "Zurich was the investor summit," Marcus said. "You made 3 billion credits worth of sovereign funds fight each other for the right to be last in our Series G. And you translated my metaphors into dilution percentages," Elias said. "We make a good pair." His reflection in the lounge glass looked even thinner than his hollow in the boardroom had. Travel lighting was rarely kind. The disease had eaten into his musculature with quiet, relentless dedication. A fine tremor threaded through his right hand when he lifted it to touch the window. "Scared?" Marcus asked before he could stop himself. "Of dying in a metal tube over the Andes?" Elias said. "Moderately. Of waking up on the other side as something unrecognizable? Intensely? Of not waking up at all? Constantly for the last 18 months? Fear is a system message, Marcus, not a verdict. You route around it or you drown in it." "You're allowed to drown once in a while," Marcus said. "No," Elias said, "I am not." He turned away from the window, aligning his gaze with the lounge exit. "Listen to me," he said. "In approximately 12 hours, someone will point a camera at you and ask what this means. Whether we succeed or fail, you will need to stand on that stage and tell them a story they can live with. Here are your openings." He ticked them off with the same hand that shook. "If we succeed and I return, embodied in our flagship synthbot, you say, 'Tonight, Synapse demonstrated that the boundary between human and machine is a membrane, not a wall. Elias Thorne is proof that mortality is a problem, not a destiny.' Then you pivot to accessibility. 'We will use this technology first to treat disease, to heal, to restore. Never lead with immortality. People hate it in others.' And if you fail," Marcus asked. "If the jet goes down," Elias said, "you say, 'We lost a visionary tonight, but we did not lose our vision.' Elias always said Synapse was never about one man. It was about a way of seeing. That way of seeing lives in all of us. Then you cry, ideally, not too much, just enough to humanize the shark." Marcus swallowed. "And if you upload, but something goes wrong on the table? If the substrate rejects you? If the quantum coherence doesn't hold? Then you don't have time for a speech," Elias said, "because your board will have you in a closed session, carving up Project Nirvana into saleable pieces and drafting statements for the class action suits. But if, by some miracle, you have a microphone in a minute, you say, 'We tried something impossible. Sometimes the future doesn't arrive on schedule. but it always arrives eventually. And then you pivot to legacy. Human brains like legacy. It comforts them. You really have thought about every branch, Marcus said softly. No, Elias said, just the ones that matter to the story. The flight attendant approached. Her smile was perfectly calibrated, warm but not intimate. Mr. Thorne, we're ready for boarding. Mr. Thorne, he repeated as if tasting it. That's about to need an asterisk. He looked at the AR lens hovering near his ocular socket, its faint shimmer visible only because Marcus knew what to look for. Cut the feed, he said. I don't want an audience for the part where they pat me down like a drug mule. Elias, Marcus started. The older man's gaze, routed through glass and air and bandwidth, met his. Guard the souls, Elias said quietly. The ones in our drives, the ones in our users. Don't let them turn into numbers on your dashboards. Before Marcus could answer, the feed snapped. The lounge vanished. The jet remained outside his own window, slightly more distant now, slightly more real. Fuel drones scuttled away. The boarding stair retracted with an insectile fold. On the apron, a single human figure climbed the last few steps into the fuselage. The door swung in, then sealed with a smooth, almost soundless motion. For a moment, nothing happened. The city breathed. Air skimmers glided between towers. The bay, a dark slab beyond the industrial shoreline, threw back faint tracers of light from floating algae farms and maintenance buoys. Somewhere far below, at street level, a protest chant rose and fell against an unrelated injustice, swallowed before it reached this height. Then the jet's running lights brightened. A wash of soft blue cascaded along its underbelly as the anti-grav generator spooled up. The landing struts lightened and flexed, compressing by a millimeter. Heat ripples shimmered, distorting the painted lines on the apron. Marcus realized his hand had found the glass again. His fingers splayed against the cold surface, as if he could hold the jet in place by contact alone. Don't go, some animal part of him thought. Go, the rest of him answered, before you decay in front of us. Not with the roar of combustion, but with the silent, crystalline ascent of a perfectly balanced algorithm solving for up. Air displaced, pressure waves rippled outward, apron equipment trembled. But from inside the tower, it looked like a magic trick. One moment the jet was resting on its wheels, the next it was hovering a meter above the tarmac, then 3, then 10. It tilted its nose toward the east and slid forward. Acceleration built gradually, then exponentially. The jet's form blurred into a pale smudge of light streaking along a corridor cleared by air traffic control. Markers on Marcus's overlay updated in real time. Altitude, velocity, trajectory. The numbers climbed with clean, contemptuous precision. He watched until the smudge vanished into the deepening twilight, swallowed by the layered haze of atmosphere and stratospheric infrastructure. Only then did he allow himself to breathe fully. Behind him, someone cleared their throat. Mr. Vane? A junior aide hovering respectfully near the door. Helena asked if you'd come to the media war room. We have incoming requests from GNN, Pan Asia, Eurostream, and at least 3 independent holocasts with 9-figure followers. Of course we do, Marcus said. He straightened his jacket, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle. The glass under his hand had warmed to match his skin. He took it away, leaving a perfect oval of condensed breath that vanished almost instantly. In the elevator, descending from the executive overlook to the media floor, he watched the altitude readout tick down. His ears popped gently at the transition between pressure zones. The tower's internal AR layer tried to soothe him with a curated info cascade. Flight telemetry, live social sentiment analyses, regulator pings, an auto-compiled highlight reel of Elias's career playing in a side window. He dismissed most of it with an impatient flick. By the time the doors opened onto the media suite, he had the recorded statements Elias had mentioned queued and ready in his personal buffer. They sat there like sealed letters marked open in case of catastrophe. The war room had once been a standard crisis communications hub. It had evolved over the years into something closer to a broadcast control center crossed with a social psychology lab. Tiered workstations faced a massive, wraparound set of displays that showed the world's attention in real time. Heat maps of engagement, trending topics, sentiment arcs, influencer cluster graphs. One section, always reserved for regulators, now showed incoming queries from the Federal Neurotechnology Commission, the EU Cognitive Rights Board, and 3 national ministries of health. Helena stood at the central console, backlit by shifting infographics. Her face in profile looked drawn and faintly green from the data glow. "How bad?" Marcus asked, moving to her side. "Depends on your metric," she said without greeting. "If we're measuring curiosity, we're breaking records. If we're measuring concern..." On one screen, a GNN anchor's face filled the frame, gravely earnest. A lower third banner screamed, "Thorne's last flight, genius or hubris?" Alongside, a ticker of live comments scrolled, "Uploading your soul? Creepy of greater than if anyone can do it, it's Elias. Greater than this is how every dystopian show starts, y'all." Another feed showed a protest outside Synapse's Eurohub. A few hundred people, most unaugmented by the look of them, holding hand-painted signs. "Souls are not software. No gods, no ghosts." An opposing crowd, larger and more polished, chanted Thorne forever, waving AR-enhanced banners that rippled with his iconic silhouette. "Regulators?" Marcus asked. "Playing it cool in public," Helena said. "In private, they're drafting new acronyms." He scanned the internal messages. Several commissions wanted assurances that Project Nirvana did not violate existing prohibitions on non-consensual neural replication or data trafficking of conscious states. Others wanted to know whether, if Elias died during the procedure, Synapse would store his map indefinitely, and whether that constituted a kind of illegal post-mortem incarceration. "We've got templates," he said. "We'll lean on medical therapeutic framing. This is an experimental treatment for a degenerative condition, not an elective immortality gambit. Until he walks back in here in a shiny new body and does a TED sphere on conquering death," Helena said dryly, "then it will be hard to maintain the palliative care narrative." "If he walks back in," Marcus said. She looked at him. "If," she repeated softly. Around them, the war room buzzed. Staffers in Synapse gray-blue murmured into headsets, their words modulated by real-time sentiment analysis. "Soften here, sharpen there, add 30% more reassurance, 20% less jargon." A wall section streamed long focus features hastily rerun by news outlets. "The architect of tomorrow, why we trust Elias, the man who taught the world to dream in R." Somewhere, in the upper left quadrant of his awareness, a telemetry feed flashed a status. SNY-ALT-A-001-ASCENTSTABLE-ET, a 7 hours 42 minutes. He fixed on that line, used it as an anchor. "Let's schedule a live statement," he said. "Short, 15 minutes from now. We'll give them enough to chew on without overpromising." Helena nodded. "We'll stage it in Studio A. Backdrop with the city, not the product wall. We want human, not corporate." "I'll need 10 minutes alone afterward," he added, almost as an afterthought. Her eyes narrowed slightly at that. "For what?" "To draft contingencies," he said smoothly, "in case flight telemetry changes." She studied him for a fraction longer than was comfortable, then nodded once. "5, she said. "You get 5. If something goes wrong, they'll want you in front of a camera, not behind a console." The statement itself blurred in his memory later. He remembered walking into Studio A, the cameras like black eyes, the teleprompter hovering at the limit of his depth of field. He remembered the city behind him in the window, glittering and oblivious. He remembered saying the phrases he and Elias had rehearsed: boundary, membrane, courage, treatment, hope. He remembered the question from an independent holocaster whose avatar was a wolf with neon eyes. "Isn't this just another example of elites buying their way out of mortality while the rest of us die in waiting rooms?" the wolf asked. "What guarantee do we have that this tech will ever trickle down?" "Mortality is not a subscription service," Marcus answered almost by reflex. "If this works, it will open doors for treating neurodegenerative diseases that don't care how many credits you have. We're not selling immortality. We're fighting entropy." He came off stage to a wall of haptic notifications, applause emojis, think piece drafts, regulator sidebars. The statement had hit its marks. Sentiment graphs ticked marginally toward optimism. 5 minutes, Helena reminded him, before someone from PR could drag him into another debrief. He ducked into a smaller, darker room off the war floor, an old, mostly unused physical meeting space that had somehow survived Synapse's transition to full AR collaboration. The table was real wood, scarred from pre-digital coffee cups. The chairs creaked when you sat in them. He closed the door and for the first time that day, disabled his AR overlay. The world shrank abruptly. No floating windows, no sentiment lines, no alt text on his own emotions. Just a room, a table, 4 chairs, and the faint hum of air filtration. He sat, placed his hands flat on the wood, and let the silence thicken. In it, the questions he'd been fending off all day rose like bubbles. What if he didn't come back? Not in the catastrophic sense. He had branch trees for that. Insurance triggers, leadership reshuffles, a whole different life in which Marcus Vane, interim CEO, became permanent by virtue of being the last man standing. That future was bloody, but at least it had rules. No, the more terrifying possibility was the one he'd hinted at in the boardroom, and Elias had sidestepped with metaphors. That Elias would return, but not as someone Marcus could read. That the delicate balance they'd evolved over 15 years, visionary and optimizer, dreamer and shark, would vanish. Elias 2.0 would be something else. Faster, less patient, unburdened by fatigue and pain, unhindered by the human reluctance to hurt people's feelings in pursuit of an objective. In one pocket of his private neural archive, a secure local buffer not mirrored to Synapse's main systems, Marcus had been nurturing a project of his own, a strategic engine, a predictive kernel built around the oldest treatise on conflict he knew, Sun Tzu's The Art of War. It had begun as an intellectual exercise. Could you encode a 2,000-year-old philosophy of war into a modern algorithm, then apply it to markets instead of battlefields? Over years, between acquisitions and product launches, he had trained it on data, hostile takeovers, regulatory battles, brand wars. The engine had become something he trusted more than most human advisors. It saw angles he didn't, recommended feints he would never have conceived. Now for the first time he wondered, really wondered, what might happen if he married that engine to a mind like Elias's. He pushed the thought away. This was not the moment. Elias was halfway to the stratosphere. The soul drive was humming gently in its cradle. Quantum cores in a mountain bunker were waiting like open graves or open doors. He needed to focus on the next hours, not on some hypothetical synthesis. He re-enabled a narrow slice of AR, just enough to see the notification. Flight update SNY ALTA 001. Altitude 36,000 feet. Velocity Mach 0.83. Course nominal. Attached, a live interior feed from the jet, encrypted end-to-end to Synapse Secure. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the accept glyph. Some instinct told him to let Elias have his last hours of human privacy. Another, stronger, pointed out that he was now responsible not only for Synapse's balance sheets, but for the man whose name had built them. The room's far wall dissolved into a view of the jet's cabin. It was quieter than he expected. The white noise hum of air pressure systems, the faint hiss of climate control. The interior had been fitted exactly to Elias's preferences. Pale ashwood veneers, charcoal upholstery, no superfluous ornament. A single narrow bed, a work surface, a small altar of sorts with a bonsai pine and a stone from some beach Elias had once called holy. Elias sat in a reclined seat by the window. He wore a dark cardigan over his usual black. His eyes were half closed. He might have been asleep, but Marcus knew the micro-tension at the corners of his mouth. He was somewhere between meditation and pain management. A synth bot sat opposite him in the aisle seat, body folded into an approximation of human repose. Its faceplate had been set to neutral blankness, a deliberate choice to avoid uncanny echoes of any of the household units. This one was all function, medical monitoring, security protocols, real-time liaison to Synapse. As Marcus watched, the bot leaned in slightly. "Mr. Thorne," it said, voice tuned to gentle mid-range. "We are approaching turbulence at the edge of the troposphere. Would you like a sedative adjustment?" "No," Elias murmured without opening his eyes. I want to feel the atmosphere notice me. The bot inclined its head as if this made sense. Marcus found himself leaning closer to the projection, as though proximity would sharpen clarity. He watched the fine tremor in Elias's fingers, the shallow rise and fall of his chest. The Soul Drive cradle, a sleek, magnetically locked box, sat in a recessed niche by his elbow. A soft blue LED pulsed, in time with something not quite a heartbeat. Marcus's wrist buzzed again. This time it was Helena. Sorry to cut your quiet time short, she said, appearing as a head and shoulders inset near the corner of the cabin feed. We have a situation. He suppressed a sigh. Define situation. Social chatter spiked in the last 5 minutes, she said. ###, don't let him upload is trending in 7 regions. Someone leaked an old internal white paper on neural substrate anomalies, the one with the worst-case psychosis scenarios. That paper was explicitly marked non-public, Marcus said. And that has never stopped an employee with a conscience and a burner account, Helena said. We're containing the narrative, but there's pressure building for an injunction. Euro regulators are whispering about an emergency stay order on the grounds of potential self-harm. He's already in the air, Marcus said, physically outside their jurisdiction. They could still make noise, Helena replied. File motions that make us look cavalier about a man's life. We need to show due diligence. He looked at the feed again. Elias's eyes were open now, gazing at the window. Clouds streaked past, lit from below by the city's dying light. The angle of view told Marcus they were already high enough that the curvature of the earth was faintly visible, a subtle bow at the world's edge. Patch me in, Marcus said. Audio only. I'll keep it short. He didn't want Elias seeing his face framed by panic. Helena made a small, economical gesture, and a moment later, a soft chime sounded in the jet's cabin. Mr. Thorne, the synthbot said, you have a secure transmission from Mr. Vane. Audio only. Of course he does, Elias muttered. Put him through. Marcus cleared his throat. Elias. Marcus, Elias said. Have they decided I need saving from myself yet? You're trending, Marcus said, because it was easier than saying yes. An old anomaly paper leaked. Euro regulators are making protective noises. We can stall them for maybe an hour, but if they push for an injunction, it will look bad if we ignore it. Image, Elias said. Always image. Public perception calibrates regulator behavior, Marcus said. If we plow through visible concern, we feed the narrative that Synapse thinks it's above the rules, that you think you're above the rules. Do you, Marcus? Elias asked. Think I am above them? The question landed heavier than it should have. No, Marcus said after a beat. I think you designed most of them. Good, Elias said softly. Then you know why this goes ahead. Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. Just tell me on record that you understand the risks, he said, that we're not coercing you, that you're informed, competent, and willing. So when some commission digs through this in 5 years, we have more than a waived NDA. Oh, we're doing legalese, Elias said. Very well. His tone shifted, gaining a performative clarity. I, Elias Thorne, fully understand that Project Nirvana may fail catastrophically, he said, as if dictating to an invisible notary. I understand that I may die on this table, that my neural map may corrupt, that I may wake as something unrecognizable even to myself, or not at all. I consent to all of that, not because I have a death wish, but because the alternative is to let this disease eat me neuron by neuron until I can't remember why I cared in the first place. He paused. Is that sufficient? He asked. Yes, Marcus said quietly. Good, Elias said. Then tell your regulators this. I am not their ward. I am not a child. If they are so terrified of citizens choosing what to do with their own minds that they would chain my dying brain to this seat, then they are the ones who require psychiatric evaluation. You know I can't quote that, Marcus said. Then paraphrase, Elias replied. A soft shudder ran through the cabin. The overhead lights flickered once. Turbulence, the synthbot said calmly. Crossing shear interface, all systems nominal. See, Elias said. The atmosphere noticed me. The transmission line crackled faintly. a residual artifact of the jet's encryption cascade syncing with Synapse's relays. "Marcus," Elias said, and now there was something in his voice that cut through Marcus's trained calm, a rawness. "If I don't..." For a half-second, all Marcus heard was white noise and the roar of some deeper frequency under it, like a giant exhaling. "Elias," he snapped. The cabin feed stuttered, frames smearing like wet paint. For a moment, the view outside the jet's window distorted into a kaleidoscope of refracted light. Stars bending, clouds warping, a strange haloed corona around the horizon. "Signal degradation," intoned a neutral system voice in Marcus's ear. "Unmodeled atmospheric interference. Rerouting." On the big boards in the war room outside, telemetry alarms sang out like a chorus of distant birds. Altitude spiked, then dipped. Velocity flickered. The line marked course nominal blinked amber. Helena's face appeared in Marcus's peripheral vision, layered over the glitching cabin feed. "We're seeing anomalies," she said unnecessarily. "No shit," he hissed. "Some kind of high-altitude storm," a tech called from the floor beyond the office door. "We're getting conflicting readings from the weather sats. Microburst, ionization front. It's not on any of the models." The cabin feed steadied for an instant. Elias's face flickered into clarity, lit greenish by emergency LEDs. Over his shoulder through the warped window, something like lightning crawled horizontally across the sky, a lattice of light in the thin air. "Marcus," he said, his voice threaded with static. "If I don't make it, listen to me. The soul drive..." Not gracefully, no smooth fade to black, no polite lost connection glyph. The image stretched, pixel columns ripping like fabric under too much strain, colors smeared into each other. For a fractured moment, Marcus saw a dozen Elias faces overlapping, eyes wide, mouth forming a word the compression couldn't carry. Then everything crashed into brilliant, featureless white. The audio dissolved into a hiss that climbed through frequencies, like a scream being pulled out of hearing range. Marcus flinched involuntarily, his hands flying to his ears, though the sound existed only in his implants. "Cut it," Helena snapped. "Reroute. Find another relay." "Trying," came the reply. "We lost primary SAT handshake. Switching to ground-based tracking. Give me..." The projection wall in front of Marcus went black, then filled with system text in stark red. "Live feed lost. Source: SNY Alta. 001. Telemetry: intermittent. Status: unknown. Reestablishing." On the war room boards, the jet's icon, a simple white arrow, blinked. Its trail, a clean line across the Pacific, ended in a jagged, unresolved cluster of symbols, somewhere over a stylized mountain range. "Altitude?" Marcus demanded. "Last stable ping at 41,000 feet, a tech called. Then rapid fluctuation. Could be sensor error. Could be..." He didn't finish. "Get me ground radar," Helena ordered. "Military if you have to. I don't care who you call. Find that plane." The room erupted into motion. Lines opened to air traffic control, to international aviation authorities, to orbital weather arrays that suddenly had everyone's full attention. Data poured in like panicked voices, all talking at once. Some said microburst, some said clear air. One obscure sensor in a forgotten satellite whispered something in a low-band data trickle about a transient spike in high-altitude ionization. None of them told Marcus what he needed to know. His wrist buzzed again. This time the notification was stark and simple. Greater than SNY-ALTA-001, greater than contact lost, greater than ETA:(N/A. In the silence between shouts, between status calls, between the heartbeats he could suddenly hear in his own ears, he became aware of an absurd detail. His thumb had left a faint crescent indentation in the wood of the table where he'd been bracing his hand. Wood did that when you pressed hard enough. It yielded, it remembered. Airplanes did not. "Marcus," Helena said from the doorway. Her voice was controlled, but something brittle glinted under the surface. "We need you." Her eyes asked a question she didn't voice. What story do we tell the world now? Behind her, the war room's main wall shifted, the live flight map minimized. A new template slid into place, half-built but familiar. Elias Thorne's face framed in soft focus, eyes lifted towards some imagined future. Text scrolled under it, waiting to be filled. In the empty space where dates would go, a cursor blinked. Marcus breathed in once, deeply, tasting the faint antiseptic tang of the air, the ghost of Elias's last interrupted sentence hanging in his mind. Marina! He stood, straightened his jacket, and stepped toward the doorway, toward the boards, toward the blinking cursor in the assembled eyes. Whatever else had happened in the whited-out chaos at 41,000 feet, one fact had settled like a stone in his chest. The only intact trace of Elias Thorne now on Earth was the matte black rectangle lying in a vault 12 floors below, waiting. Waiting to be inherited, and somewhere between his fear and his ambition, between his shark's hunger and the flicker of something bewilderingly like grief, a thought unfolded with terrible crystalline clarity. We don't have to lose him. We can remake him. He stepped into the light of the war room, voice already shaping words of loss, resilience, and the future. Far beneath his measured cadence, beneath the solemn graphics and the sad music the networks would overlay, another story was beginning in the quiet hum of a secured sublevel. A story written not in tears and eulogies, but in code, and the soul drive waited for his hand.